Tonight on Reporting Scotland. Armed police move in to end a standoff with a man reportedly armed with a crossbow in a house in Blantyre. A lifetime ban on keeping animals after this man was found guilty of cruelty to dogs. The SSPCA calls for stronger action in cruelty cases.
We're not saying everyone should go to prison, but it should be for these habitual offenders, especially when it is such large animals and it's such big business.
Also in the programme, MSPs overwhelmingly back the Scottish Government's fracking ban, but the Conservatives say it's a missed opportunity for jobs. We look ahead to tonight's Scottish Premiership football with an Edinburgh derby among the matches. Scotland's national rugby coach refuses to comment on the suspension of a player amid allegations of cocaine use. Good evening. A standoff in a Lanarkshire housing estate between police and a man reportedly armed with a crossbow came to a dramatic end this afternoon when the house went up in flames. The area around the street in Blantyre had been cordoned off and nearby schools told to keep pupils indoors. Stephen Godden followed developments.
Shot.
The dramatic conclusion to an armed standoff in Blantyre.
Here we go, the police are going in.
A swift armed response as flames begin to take hold. Round the back of the house, neighbours look on horrified. One of the two people inside was this woman's niece.
I just ran up here. I knew right about my niece, I could feel it. And then the house went up in flames and I could hear her screaming and banging at the window. But they've got to do it now and that's the main thing. That's all that was worrying me.
Events began to unfold mid-morning, police responding to a man reportedly holed up in this Blantyre estate with a crossbow, a woman also inside the house.
I seen the four policemen running up with the shields. That was about 10 to 11, and then the police, 5 traffic cops, the armed response, they come in, they turned in about 10 minutes later, I think it was.
Streets were sealed off as the police helicopter buzzed overhead, negotiators attempting to defuse a situation that forced local schools into lockdown.
I tried to phone the school up, obviously it just went on answer machine it was, and it was just to make sure that the kids are all safe in the school. It's on lockdown.
My daughter's house is right over the back from them, and my son-in-law was in the house with my grandson. So as soon as I seen the fire going up, I just ran up past the cordon to get to my grandson and get him out the house.
For a long time there was little outward sign of movement until police moved in. Around 3.5 hours after the incident first began, we heard shouting in the street and then smoke from the building behind me. The flames then spread rapidly. As the firefighters worked, ambulance crews checked over the woman who'd been inside. Police have confirmed that a 36-year-old man has been arrested in connection with the incident. Stephen Godden, Reporting Scotland, Blantyre.
The Scottish SPCA has called for tougher sentences for those convicted of animal cruelty, including increasing the maximum jail term from 1 year to 5. The organisation spoke out after a man was banned from owning animals for life after he was filmed beating dogs with a stick. You may find footage in Suzanne Allen's report upsetting.
This is Christopher Gorman after leaving court this morning. He's just been banned for life from keeping animals. And here's why. Last year he was filmed by a neighbour hitting dogs with a piece of wood. The 11 mastiffs were heard whimpering and crying. The neighbour called the SSPCA. When they arrived, the dogs were living in unsanitary conditions. One was dead, another was dying. Outside court, we spoke to the SSPCA. This investigator has to remain anonymous.
We walked into the house and there was dogs literally dying in front of us, and they had to be euthanised by a vet to prevent them from further suffering. So in terms of scale, this is at the highest level of animal cruelty.
It's not the first time Gorman has been in trouble. Earlier this year, he was convicted of selling sick puppies without a licence and keeping them in poor conditions. These dogs lived in a yard strewn with debris and excrement. The SSPCA say sentences for offenders like Gorman should be much tougher.
Where there's been habitual cruelty, we actually feel that the sentences should be greater. At the present moment, maximum sentence is 1 year, and we reckon it should be 5 years in prison. And again, that would give sheriffs a bigger range of options. We're not saying everyone should go to prison, but it should be for these habitual offenders, especially when it is such large animals and it's such big business.
On handing him a lifetime ban in caring for animals and fining him £2,600, Sheriff Matheson said the video in which Gorman is hitting the dogs, she said, made uncomfortable viewing. Suzanne Allen, reporting Scotland, Airdrie Sheriff Court.
MSPs have overwhelmingly backed a ban on fracking in Scotland. That's unconventional drilling for oil and gas from shale rock. But Conservatives said the ban was a blunder and that fracking could have brought a new gold rush to central Scotland. This from our political editor, Brian Taylor.
The decision on fracking was first announced earlier this month.
Fracking is being banned in Scotland. End of story.
But is it? Fracking provoked fears of environmental damage, and some warned that the policy of a ban should be written into law, claiming that was Scotland's fixed view.
To frack would not only put the brake on climate progress, but to stick us in reverse. Fracking is the toxic fag end of the fossil fuel age.
In practice, the Greens argued for writing the ban into national planning guidelines. That was backed by the Liberal Democrats and by Labour's Claudia Beamish, who agreed to drop her own member's bill on the issue. But Tories say it's all job-destroying madness. Fracking is big business in America. It involves drilling, then high-pressure water to release oil and gas from shale rock. Scotland's Grangemouth petrochemical complex already imports fracked US gas. Tories say it could use Scottish reserves instead, supporting jobs here.
For years now, the SNP have divvied on fracking, and now swathes of the Central Belt will miss out on what should have been the gold rush of this century. So shame on the Scottish Government for turning down a fantastic chance for so many Scots. High-quality, highly skilled jobs which would have taken in Scottish talent and boosted our young people's chances and aspirations.
And I call on Paul Wheelhouse.
The minister said a new law would waste precious parliamentary time, but he insisted that the ban was right to protect worried communities.
But listening to the views put across by some, including those on the Conservative benches, you would think we were talking about developments taking place miles away from any population. That is simply not the case, as fracking was proposed across areas of the densely populated Central Belt of Scotland. Creating employment and inclusive economic growth will always be key priorities for this government. But such objectives cannot come at any cost.
Tories aside, all parties backed a ban.
Yes, 91, no, 28. There were no abstentions. The motion as amended is therefore agreed.
And so a thumbs up from the minister after years of contention. Brian Taylor, reporting Scotland, Holyrood.
So we won't be fracking in Scotland, but we'll continue to import gas fracked in the United States. Well, our environment correspondent Kevin Keane joins us. Kevin, this has been described as hypocrisy.
Yes, because even though now through that vote fracking itself is banned here, Scotland is a big consumer of fracked gas, and that's imported on those big ships, those dragon ships that come across the Atlantic carrying 40,000 barrels of fracked gas every single day, and that's used in the manufacturing industry, creating plastics, not so much for energy as was a huge theme within that debate there. There has been a campaign from some environmental groups to say not here, not anywhere, and that Scotland actually should have a moral responsibility for gas that's fracked in other parts of the world, in this case Pennsylvania in the United States, and then brought here for processing. They say that actually we should just be banning the use of fracked gas here altogether. That obviously there was seemingly very little appetite for that in the debate today, and of course many jobs at Grangemouth rely on that fracked gas that is imported. And there's another argument to all of this, which of course is that by bringing all of that gas on ships halfway across the world, that has an even greater environmental impact than sourcing it locally. That debate will continue to rumble on, but there will not be fracking here in Scotland anytime soon.
Kevin, thank you. A study of food prices in the south of Scotland has found the same supermarkets charging different prices in different towns, often penalising poorer rural communities. The same basket of 11 everyday items was bought in a range of shops across Dumfries and Galloway. The total bill ranged from just under £9 at one shop in Stranraer to nearly £25 in Dalbeattie. Willie Johnson reports.
Differences in the cost of living between cities and the countryside are well documented. But what about different parts of a region that can all be regarded as rural? That's what this survey by the Citizens Advice Service sought to establish by looking at the cost of everyday items at shops across Dumfries and Galloway.
The aim was to find the cheapest possible price for 11 basic items in each shop: bread, milk, cheese, ham, beans, spread, tea bags, bananas, juice, nappies and sanitary items.
There were not unsurprising differences between small village shops and large supermarkets. But what wasn't expected was a sometimes significant difference between the same supermarkets in different towns.
To buy the cheapest version of the various items in the basket at this Tesco in Lockerbie cost the shoppers £9.53. An equivalent basket here at Tesco in Castle Douglas, a whopping £17.16. That's nearly double. Another big discrepancy was found in the difference between the price of the shopping basket at this co-op in Moffat at £14.25 compared with the co-op at Dalbeattie, where it was £23.89.
Some of the differences were really quite stark, and I understand obviously there are distribution costs, but I'm not convinced that they're so great that you have to actually double the cost of your shopping.
Both the Co-op and Tesco insisted today that they charge the same price for the same items in all their stores, although Tesco concede that the full range of products may not always be available in every shop. But the survey also found variations at Morrison's, Aldi and Lidl, and CAB are to ask all the big chains about their pricing policies. They want reassured that the cost of basic provisions in rural Scotland isn't a lottery, a postcode lottery. Willie Johnston, reporting Scotland, Dumfries and Galloway.
2 men have been charged following the murder of a man in Edinburgh on Sunday. 44-year-old Mark Squires died after allegedly being assaulted outside a pub and restaurant in the Longston area of the city. A third man has been detained by police. There's a warning that scrapping laws to tackle sectarian behaviour at football matches could send out negative signals to people with disabilities and from the LGBT community. Holyrood's Justice Committee has been hearing evidence from organisations about the impact of the legislation amidst proposals for it to be scrapped. Lisa Summers reports.
This was the sort of thing that the legislation was designed to stop: sectarian singing at football matches. It's also been used over the last 5 years to bring prosecutions for other types of offensive behaviour, all related to football. But it's been hugely controversial. Some football fans protested, claiming the laws targeted them. Others have argued it's poorly written and existing laws are adequate enough. And earlier this year, an MSP introduced a bill to see it repealed.
We now move to agenda item number 5.
Holyrood's Justice Committee has been gathering evidence from fans and organisations.
Do we support the repeal of the Offensive Behaviour at Football and Threatening Communications Act? Yes, we do. And the reason we do support the repeal of that particular piece of legislation is we are not convinced that it appropriately or effectively tackles hate crime in Scotland.
However, Stonewall Scotland said MSPs should not make a hasty decision. Repealing the bill would send out negative signals.
We're not saying that the Act is perfect, it's not. But what we're saying is if you just blanketly get rid of the Act and there's nothing in its place, what signal does that then send to LGBT people about whether they feel safe and secure in a football setting or a sports setting? And that's where we have an issue with a blanket repeal straight away with nothing in its place.
Like some other organisations, Stonewall have urged MSPs not to decide on the legislation's future until the completion of a wider review of hate crime. That's currently ongoing. But MSPs are due to vote on the matter in the next few months. Lisa Summers, reporting Scotland, Holyrood.
It's 17 minutes to 7. A reminder of tonight's top story. An arrest is made following a standoff between police and a man reportedly armed with a crossbow in Lanarkshire. And still to come, We look ahead to tonight's Scottish Premiership football with an Edinburgh derby among the matches. Deafness should not limit your dreams or define your ambitions. That was the message at the launch of a national plan for British Sign Language. It's estimated 1 in 6 Scots have difficulty hearing, and it's hoped the move will promote sign language among the deaf community and beyond. Aileen Clark reports.
Neither of us know. It's what I will find out.
Royal Conservatoire students in Glasgow rehearsing their next production. It's a unique degree course for deaf performers. With the launch in Scotland of the National Plan for British Sign Language, other organisations have a lot of catching up to do.
Next year, local authorities, colleges, NHS boards will have to produce their own local BSL plans, which will demonstrate how they're going to deliver on the long-term goals we've set out in the national plan at a local level, and we'll be putting support in place in order to help them to do that. It is a privilege and an honour to introduce...
As more detail was announced at Holyrood, it was warmly welcomed by the deaf-blind community too, who use a special form of British Sign Language.
Well, for people who are deafblind, they can use tactile BSL, as you've just seen me using. That's people who have grown up using sign language as deaf BSL users and then have lost their sight later in life.
You don't know.
It's crucial for the plan that more translators are recruited, and producing more awareness is also seen as important.
I think quite a lot of deaf people struggle quite a lot in hospitals situation because usually they don't have interpreters there. So if you're in a serious pain or something and you can't understand what's going on and what the doctors are doing to you, it's really difficult.
It's called British Sign Language, but does British Sign Language have a sort of Scottish dialect?
Absolutely. British Sign Language has dialects and regional variations, so even between Glasgow and Edinburgh, Aberdeen, we have different kind of accents that you would see, different dialects within sign, so that exists within different regions, absolutely.
The students are taking this play on tour next month, and it focuses on aspects of love in the modern day. Now, they're not expecting the national plan to help them out in that area of their life, but they do hope it will help with everyday practicalities that can be very difficult if you simply can't hear. Aileen Clark, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
One of the RNLI's longest-serving crew members is to retire from his Caithness lifeboat station this week. Thurso coxswain Bill Monroe will step down on Thursday after nearly half a century of call-outs, many of them in the notorious Pentland Firth. The 64-year-old has received a number of bravery awards for his role in some of the most challenging rescues at sea.
You don't know what you're going to come against when you're out at sea. Really heavy weather, black darkness, and up there there's an awful tide that runs in the Pentland Firth, so it can make the weather a lot worse as well, you know. So it can be pretty daunting, but you've got to put all that stuff out of your mind and get on with the job like best you can do.
Sport now, and Rangers have strongly condemned a 2-match ban given to defender Bruno Alves. The club say they're shocked by the decision, which they claim is devoid of credibility and balance. Alves was involved in an incident with Motherwell's Lewis Moat during Rangers' League Cup semi-final defeat at the weekend. Rangers are contesting the ban and insist the whole disciplinary referral system needs a radical overhaul. The first Edinburgh derby of the season takes place tonight as Hibs take on Hearts at Easter Road. This will be the first time the clubs have met in the Premiership for over 3 years. Our senior football reporter Chris McLaughlin is at the ground this evening.
Yes, both sides have spent some time in the Scottish Championship in recent years, but they are back together in the top flight, and this evening has all the hallmarks of a very intriguing encounter. Here to discuss the match with me is the former Scotland striker Stephen Thompson. Stephen, straight to the point, who's winning and why?
I honestly think it's going to be a draw. I think it's going to be a very hard-fought game. Hearts come into the game with momentum on the back of 2 straight victories, and since Craig Levine's come to the club, he's improved their defence, he's made them difficult to beat, very robust, very hard-working. Hibernian, I'd expect them to come out the traps, because the one thing they didn't do in the semi-final was start well. It took them 30-40 minutes to get into the game. In front of their home crowd, I'd expect an explosive start from Hibernian.
We're seeing pictures now of the last time these sides faced each other in the Scottish Cup. A victory for Hibs, 3-1. You expect it to be tighter?
I do. I think as much as Hibernian have been playing good football of late, they haven't really had the results maybe that their performances would have suggested. And as I mentioned before, Hearts come into the game with momentum, but I expect it to be an attritional battle rather than any real quality.
Stephen Thompson, thank you very much indeed for now. There's always something special about Hibs versus Hearts under the floodlights. It's going to be noisy, it's certainly a sellout. And if you haven't got a ticket, remember it's live on BBC Radio Scotland. Sports Sound, and kick-off is 7:45.
Well, meanwhile, the search for a new Dundee United manager has begun in earnest after the club confirmed the departure of manager Ray McKinnon. A former player at Tannadice, he was only appointed in June last year with a remit to get United promoted back to the Scottish Premiership. The side sit fourth in the Championship. He said it had been an honour and a privilege to both play for and manage his hometown club. And in rugby, the head coach of the Scottish rugby team has refused to comment on the suspension of Edinburgh forward John Hardy amid allegations of cocaine use. Meanwhile, another Edinburgh player, Magnus Bradbury, has been stripped of the club captaincy for his off-the-field behaviour. More now from our sports reporter, David Curry.
Scotland play 3 autumn internationals here at Murrayfield next month against Samoa, New Zealand and Australia. Head coach Gregor Townsend naming his 36-man squad today, but one player is conspicuous by his absence. Edinburgh forward John Hardy has been suspended pending a Scottish rugby investigation. It concerns allegations of cocaine use, not something the person in charge of the national team wants to discuss.
There's an investigation going on, so I can't obviously comment on that to prejudice that, so I'm going to be saying no comment if you ask any more questions on it.
Hardy's not the only Edinburgh player whose behaviour has led to an investigation. Magnus Bradbury suffered a head injury on a night out, missing matches as a result.
I've stood him down as captain because I'm not going to accept that behaviour from my captain away from the field. The players are very aware of what I expect from them away from the field, and they're adults, you know, and they have to make the right decisions.
With 2 investigations in quick succession, questions are being asked about the club's culture.
People have said to me that the Edinburgh environment is a little bit loose, and I don't want that to affect what happens on the field, but also we have a responsibility away from the field.
Edinburgh's new captain says he wants to improve things on and off the field.
Look, I'm not saying we had bad culture or poor standards, but I think every team can get better and every team can drive forward. We've got a very young team, and I think that's maybe one of our problems. We've not like a lot of the senior players have either left or maybe not stepped up to the plate.
Of the 36 players in the Scotland squad announced today, 13 play for Edinburgh. But for now, it's off-the-field matters that are putting the club in the spotlight. David Curry, reporting Scotland, Murrayfield.
We heard earlier in the programme a story of animal cruelty. Well, here's a happier tale about man stepping in to help a suffering beast. The animal in question, a bear in Myanmar, had a condition which meant his tongue swelled and weighed half a stone. Well, a vet from Glasgow was part of a team that went to the rescue. Katie Hunter can tell us more.
This is Nentu, a bear with a tongue so heavy it became a major health hazard. International vets looking after him had never seen anything like it and decided earlier this year they needed to operate. Romain Pitsy, who's more used to dealing with smaller wildlife in Alloa, was one of 2 Scottish experts called to help.
We put special clamps across the tongue to prevent excessive blood coming in there, and then we cut it with an electrosurgical knife. So that's like a little hot knife that seals small blood vessels, and then we made the tongue a little bit flatter because it was really, really chunky, so the bear wouldn't be able to close its mouth. And then we obviously closed the tongue carefully with several sutures, took the clamps off and checked that nothing bled.
This is Nentu right before the operation, which took 4 hours from start to finish. The procedure was a success, but Nentu is still being monitored in Myanmar in case of complications. Before the operation, he loved playing with his brother. The pair had to be separated while Nentu recovered, but have now been reunited.
Seeing him go back in with the other bear, that was just such a big thing for him. He was so happy to be with his friend, and just seeing them wrestle and roll, I think he's doing really well.
Nentu means bright in English. Vets hope this bear's future will now live up to his name. Katie Hunter, reporting Scotland.
OK, the pictures might not have been the best, but it had a happy ending, did it not, Christopher?
It did indeed. Thank you very much. Hello there. It was OK today weather-wise. Some sunshine around for some of us at times, a fair amount of cloud, a little bit of rain, and certainly now our attention is back on the wet weather as we go overnight, outbreaks of rain pushing in across the south up towards the central belt. At the same time, wet weather in the northwest. This sort of pincer movement coming together, so a cloudy, wet night, breezy at times. But the rain in the south clears quite quickly, and in the north turning showery. So 8 to 10 Celsius in town, a few sheltered spots across the northeast, down to a cooler 5 or 6. So tomorrow morning, still a few outbreaks of rain at first, but actually it doesn't look too bad at all. Most of that wet weather will ease off, and many of us will have a dry, fine day tomorrow with some spells of sunshine. Quite windy, though, particularly around the west and northwest coast, but across central, southern and eastern Scotland, the wind's lighter. It's largely dry, fine and bright. Temperatures similar to today, 13-14 Celsius. Across parts of Stirlingshire in towards Argyll, the Highlands and Islands, a number of showers, and certainly through the Minches up towards Cape Wrath and the Northern Isles. A fair wind here, strong to gale force at times, and a rash of showers for the Northern Isles. But Murray, Aberdeenshire down towards Angus, dry, fine and bright, just perhaps the occasional shower at times. Little change as we head through towards the evening and overnight, with that windy, wet weather continuing across the far north. And at the same time, we have a weather front across central parts of England. We're in between these two systems, though. Certainly down south, it's a lot milder, but it is cloudy. It's fairly claggy at times. We have cooler, fresher air, but brighter, sunnier air. So actually, we're probably doing better. Largely fine, dry and bright on Thursday. A few showers around, but fewer in number compared with tomorrow. The wind's still brisk, though, this time from the northwest across the north and northeast coast. Temperatures similar, 13-14 Celsius. Friday doesn't look bad either. High pressure not too far away, keeping things largely dry, fine and bright. But the isobars starting to come together, so the wind's increasing. Rain for Shetland. That's the forecast.
Thank you, Christopher. Now a reminder of tonight's main news. A standoff in a Lanarkshire housing estate between police and a man reportedly armed with a crossbow came to a dramatic end this afternoon when the house went up in flames. And 250,000 people are to get compensation from the retailer Bright House after financial regulators found the company wasn't acting as a responsible lender. The firm sells household goods on hire purchase agreements. And that's Reporting Scotland. Our next main bulletin, 10:25. Until then, from all the team, enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye.